Welcome in to a humankind video here on the Maddish Moose YouTube channel, where I'm going to specifically address a topic that I think needs a little bit of covering to help people optimize their games of humankind a little bit more. Now, this is something that I think there's a lot of different strategies behind, and so I'd love to see in the comments if you want to comment on your strategy for how you use your workers, or what in humankind are called specialists. How do you place and use your specialists in humankind? And that is what I want to go over today. What are my strategies for worker or specialist placement in humankind, and when do I shift them? What are the mechanics behind them, and when should they kind of be moved around potentially? And I have some pretty simple, basic premises that I operate off of in my games in order to be successful in getting my cities off and running, and then execute my strategies throughout the rest of my humankind game with my specialists. And so let's jump into a game. So what I've done here is I've turned back time in our humankind Let's Play series, which we wrapped up a few weeks ago. So the link to that is going to be down in the description below. So if you want to catch up on any of that series, I'll link to episode 1. That will take you through the whole series. So if you want to look at how this game progressed from this point using some of these strategies, you could watch that entire series. But I've turned back time all the way to turn 65 in that game. And so let's take a look at specialists and how they work in humankind. Here we are, back in our capital city of Corral once again, and we will notice something quickly about Corral. They're at 19 population. Our 19 population, that happens to be our population cap. And we've talked about this a lot. You want to try to stay over your population cap, because once you have population that are over cap, they do get you things. You get lots of good bonuses for high population in humankind. So it's not a horribly awful thing to be over population cap. And in fact, I run a lot of my games over pop cap. But you want to try to stay at that pop cap number, because what happens is after you go over your population limit, none of your population can be slotted into your specialist slots anymore. And that becomes problematic, because now you have population that, yes, they are getting you certain gains on anything that's per population, and you get increased influence and things like that generated based on your population numbers. So it is getting you gains. However, those populations are not working. They are not in specialist spots, which are getting you extra bonuses. Here are our specialist spots. So in our capital city, we have maxed everything out. We have 5 available food specialists, 4 available industry specialists, 4 available money specialists, and 6 available science specialists. That is based on builds, right? You get more slots for these based on different builds. That's infrastructures, that's techs, that's districts, all of those things, right? So any one of these quarters, right? A research quarter gets you, you'll notice that last thing on the list, +1 researcher slot. So if you build a research quarter, this would go up to 7. And so that also then increases your population limit. So all of your quarters will get you a corresponding specialist slot available for that. They also increase your population limit. So again, it's good to build districts. Now, you have that stability penalty, that -10 stability every time you build one. So then you're playing off of that, right? There are, of course, certain infrastructures that also get you additional specialist spots. The granary is a great example of this. +1 farmer slot when you build the granary. So the granary is going to get you not only the +2 food per farmer, also going to give you the ability to get an extra farmer through that +1 farmer slot. So pay attention to those things, because that not only does it impact your population limit, it also impacts how many specialists you can have slotted in your city. Now, how do you distribute these? That, I think, is where some key strategy comes in the game of humankind. I think that changes throughout the course of the game. You'll see right now, we don't even have to think about that, because we're at 19 of 19 in the capital city. Every single specialist slot is being filled, and so we don't really have to make that choice, right? However, we may need to make different decisions based on where that particular city is, or where we are at in the game as far as where we put these specialists. Why? Because where we put these specialists actually determines yields for the city. Every specialist slot that you fill corresponds to a +6 yield gain in each of the different categories. So we have +6 times 5, we're getting 30 extra food out of this city just from our specialists, right? That doesn't include the bonuses that we're getting from our granary. It doesn't include the bonuses we're getting from any of our infrastructures or our districts, right? Our specialists alone are generating +6 food per specialist working in the city. And so if we have 5 of those food specialists, 5 times 6, I believe it's 30. Check my math. So then we ended up with extra food. So if we were to, and I can't actually show you in this city, so we'll move to another city shortly. If we were to remove one of our specialists, we will see, I think Huatu is also in the same position. We can't move much around. So we'll go up here to Lulaban. Relatively newer city, only 10 population. There's 16 possible spots. So you can see it looks a little different up here. We've got 4 food specialists available, 4 industry specialists available, and then we have 4 science and 4 money. We're not actually working all of those slots that are available to us. So again, we're getting +6 food per specialist here. So if we pull one of these specialists out and say, hey, we want it to be in money, we can drop it over here in money, but our food now has gone down, right? So you notice our food is at +17 per turn. All of a sudden, we're going to drop that down to 9 food per turn when we make that switch. And you might notice, well, you said that that it's +6 per worker. Yeah, there are other things that are impacting this as well. And so as you kind of go throughout the game, I believe there are texts that impact this. I think it's baseline +6. So I think what this is telling us is that we're actually getting 8 food per farmer because of some different things that's going on. And for specifically what this says here is we are getting +2 food from Druidic lore, which is an empire bonus. And so if we go and look at the Celts, I believe that's what our Druidic lore is, our special trait. And so we're getting +2 food per farmer on city or outpost. And so you can see how there are different things throughout the game that will also impact where you want to put your specialists. We're actually getting 8 food per farmer because of Druidic lore. One of the reasons why the Celts are incredibly powerful is because of this. And so we're getting more for that. We're actually getting 9 industry per, because we have some luxury resources here that are actually increasing our industry, right? So if we go to our luxury resource, which is actually, it's just all of our luxuries, right? So we just look at one of our, where's our production-based luxuries? Here it is. Marble is probably the one that's doing this, right? So it says on all cities, when we have access to marble, +3 industry per worker. So that is impacting the number, right, of industry we're getting from each of our workers up to 6, because we've got that +3 listed right there, right? So things to think about as you're looking at different resources is it does impact your baseline. +6 is the baseline. Every time you put a specialist in, you're getting +6 of that resource wherever you slot them. But it actually tells you right here what you're getting from each of them, right? So we're just getting the base on science, so we're just getting the base value. That +6 science, that's what we're getting right now, right? But you can see we're gonna lose 8 if we choose to move this. We're losing 8 of our food. Our per turn food just went down, right? Now, I like food, so that's why I keep this like it is. So let's talk about moving around workers and when should you do it. Here is my personal strategy and philosophy on where to put specialists and when to move them. And in order to show you what I like to do, first I want to go down to our brand new city. We had just founded at this point in the game on the New World, our city of Nemosos. Now, Nemosos has just 1 population. So let's start from there and talk about, as your city grows, where to put your folks. Here's my rule of thumb, and I'm sure that other people have comments and thoughts on this, so please feel free to leave those comments down in the comment section below, because I'm interested in hearing other people's thoughts on specialist placement, specialist distribution, and when you choose to make maneuvers on that. Here's what I like to do, and it served me pretty dang well in my Humankind games. I will always start with 1 on the food. We want 1 in food because we want to get that growth up so we can get another population, because that will give us another specialist to be able to work in the city. That's where I start to change things a little bit. My second specialist, my second population that I get in my city, I will always put in industry. So I'm going to keep my first population is going to be in food. My second specialist I like to put in industry. After that, I will try to max out food. right? So notice I have in this city, and this is baseline, okay? Your baseline, so your city center will get you 2 specialist spots for food, 2 specialist spots for industry, 2 for money, and 2 for science. So you get the 2 spots baseline. So every city is going to start with a population limit or population cap of 8, because you got 2, 2, 2, 2, okay? And so that's where you're going to start. So I'm going to split between food and industry on my second population. So my second population is going to go into industry. So that'll be 1 food, 1 industry. Then I'm going to jump back to food. I'm going to go back to food. If my third population is going to go into food again, so I'm going to get 2 of 2 in my food specialist and leave the 1 in industry. At that point, usually you will have built a building that will increase something. My tendency in the game of Humankind is to build a building, probably a granary, probably an animal barns, or even a farmer's quarter, more likely even than that. And the likelihood is that you will have probably increased your cap for your specialist spots for food. I will keep maxing out food at this point at all possible times. I think that population is king in Humankind, and so I always want maximum food workers, food specialists at all times possible, because I want to max out that food. The more food you have per turn, the faster the growth is in that city, and so then the more specialists you can get for other things. Now, there will come a time in the game when you start hitting those population limits, and so maybe you could start easing back on the food a little bit if you are not wanting to go over those population limits. I don't think that, in my personal opinion, I think that population is still so powerful in this game that I don't mind going over population limits necessarily. Just train an army up to drop those population limits down if you need to, right? There's a lot of different potential things you can do in order to do that. So I'm almost always going to max out food after that second population. I want to get 1 into industry with my second one because I want that extra industry. Everything goes so slowly in a first city from a growth standpoint. And so what you really want to take advantage of with that second person, in my opinion, that second specialist being in industry is, let's jump them over into industry to get the builds out faster. It's probably, if you're me, it's getting my food builds out faster. My animal barns, my granaries, my food quarters, my farm districts, those are going faster now because I'm actually spending some of my specialists on industry and getting that +6 base, right? Again, it's +9 for me in my particular empire, but you're getting at least that +6 base out of one of your people. So that's my food industry relationship when I'm talking about specialist placement, okay? I go 1 into food first, 1 into industry with my second person, and then after that, I'm maxing out food, and then I'm usually maxing out industry, okay? Before I do anything, typically speaking in my games, before I do anything in money or science, I'm maxing out both food and industry. And you can see that up here in Lulaban better, right? I have 4 of 4 and 4 of 4 in food and industry because I want growth to be as fast as possible, and I want my industry to be as big as possible to get my builds out faster in my cities. Then you have a decision to make about what are you going to do once you've maxed out these 2 things. What are you going to do with the rest of your specialists? Do you go money or do you go science? And this, I think, is where you do a lot more flexing throughout the game of Humankind. I think that there are certain times in the game where money becomes very important, and so you might be shifting all of your workers, all of your specialists into the money specialist spots if you have extra population, or there are other times in the game where you probably are going to shift it back and want science to be your #1 priority. That, I think, is very game dependent. It's about where you're at in the game. Here's a popular example of this. If you are in the tech tree, and you are looking at the tech tree, and you are approaching the end of an era, right? Remember, once you research all the techs in an era, you can't research anything else. You are burning science. So if you're getting close to the end of an era, we're not here, but for example, if you had researched a lot of these, or you're getting close to the end, and you know you're not going to move up right away because you're going after a star, you're trying to maximize your fame in that particular era, or you have more emblematic districts to build, any of those reasons, right? While you might be staying in an era a little extra long, a great thing to do is slow down your science production so that you don't end up burning a bunch of science because you're going to stay in that era for any sort of extended period of time. So if that would be one reason where you would probably take all of your science folks, right? Take all of your science folks and move them out. But might as well pick up money while we can and not end up burning science at the end if we're going to stay in that particular era. There might be other reasons for this. Maybe you've just built up an army, but you've researched a tech where you now can upgrade all of your units, but you don't have the money that you need to be able to do that. Jump into your cities and switch everyone over into money to boost that money up over the next couple of turns to be able to upgrade that army to then send them out and do whatever dastardly deeds you had planned for the armies that you have raised, right? So you can switch. I think that the money and science one can switch back and forth fluidly throughout the game in order to do that. Now, generally speaking, if you want my advice, I am always going to go science over money for the most part. Science is pretty critical in humankind because it gets you access to techs that will give you big bonuses, important techs that will get you access to fame, important techs that will get you access to food or better buildings or the ability to put your boats in the water and cross deep water. All kinds of things, right, in the tech tree are important. It also generates a lot of your win conditions. A lot of your, not win, again, it's humankind, end game conditions are generated through the science tree. And so science becomes very important. If you fall behind in science, usually no amount of money particularly can save you if they're coming at you with musketmen and you're still running archers or crossbowmen. That's not going to go very well for you. And so you want to make sure that your science is keeping pace with everybody. So here is my final kind of tip or trick for specialists in humankind. This little bar right here is really handy, okay? So there is preset policies for how to work your city. If you select balanced policy, which is where every one of your cities will start by default, all of your cities will start on balanced policy. What that means is it will just take, the computer automatically will take your specialists and put them in order of food, then industry, then money, then science. And then it will start filling again. Food, then industry, then money, then science. And you can see this take place here when we implemented our balanced policy. It went 3 food, 3 industry, 2 money, 2 science. It's going to spread everything out evenly, putting a priority in this order: food, industry, money, and then science. That is going to be its priority order. So if we got another population in this city under balanced policy, we would then get our next population is going to go into money. Then after that, it's going to go into science, and then it's going to restart, go back, it's going to go into food because we have an extra food spot still. Then it'll fill industry, then money, and then science. So all of your cities start on balanced policy, okay? That's just the policy that it starts on. Now, you could also choose the city growth policy right here. That automatically sets it for food, and then industry, and then science and growth, but it splits them. You could actually read it here, right? So it's food and industry, and then money and science, okay? Food industry, then money science. So it's actually going to fill food industry first, and then it's going to split between money and science. So it's doing a split between food and industry, then it's going to do a split between money and science. Not a bad play, okay? You could also go economic exports. That is going to get you a focus on industry gold, industry money, and then science and food, okay? So you can see it's done that exact thing, right? Industry and money, maxed out, and then it's split everything between food and science, and you can quickly see how that's going to impact our city. Then you could go public control, which is food first, then a split between everything else. So if you're, okay, we want to make sure food is maxed out, but then you know what? I want an even split between the rest of them. That's public control. Technology subsidies is gold science, then food industry, right? So technology subsidies will get you that. We're going to drop these, but we're going to fill these first and then split between the rest, right? So it's a split here and a split here, but it's prioritizing 2 and 2. So that's again, something you can do. And then there's my personal suggestion, which is I think where most players have gone to, which is expert policy, where you set your priorities yourself. And this is what all of my cities end up being on. Now, I typically will leave them on balanced to start with, because balanced will automatically do what I like, which is put 1 into food first, and the second will go into industry. Now, after that, Once you get your third person in the city, it's going to try to put that into money. And so that's where I want to shift into the other one, where I'm like, no, I'm going to switch into my expert policy now, because I don't want that third person in money. I want that third person back into food, right? So you could, if you wanted to, right, choose city growth. City growth would accomplish that for you as well, because it's going to max out this first and then start just spreading the other two. So you could go from balanced policy into city growth to accomplish my tactic, but I like to go straight into expert policy. And what you can do with expert policy is you just get to rearrange these little icons right down here. So this is on expert policy. I'm saying I want you to fill food first, then I want you to fill industry, then science, then gold, right? So I can flip these. If I want to do gold, I just move gold in, boom, it moves everyone over into gold. And I do that throughout the game. Right? When I run into situations where I need that little extra bit of money, boom, I'm going to switch a couple of my cities, maybe even not all of them. Maybe I just switch a couple of my cities off science and into gold to boost up my gold production. Most of the time, I'm going food, production, science, and then gold. But I think those last two kind of flip around every so often in your cities. So, again, we could check out Huatu here. They're almost completely full, right? So their expert policy is in effect. They've maxed out food, industry, then science, and then they put the next people into money. But again, we could flip this around. If we moved gold first, it's going to switch those specialists around. We're going to have that empty spot is going to move on to science. And we could do that even further, right? Like we could switch like we want production first. Great. We could do that in any way, shape, or form. That way you don't have to manually move them around. Now, can you also manually move them around? 100%. You definitely can. There is also a little bit of a visual trickery that happens when you get an extra slot. The turn that you build the building that gets you the extra slot, it doesn't actually show here correctly. So if you're on expert policy, and I found this to be true almost 100% of the time, if you build something like we were building, I can't remember if we had the granary in here. So if we built the granary here in Corral, on the turn that it's completed, we would get an extra farmer slot. And that farmer slot would show up as empty, even if we have population available to fill it. What happens is at the end of the turn, it actually fixes that, so you're not actually at a disadvantage, but your numbers are actually not correct. And so if you ever see that where you're like, wow, I have, let's say you had, in one turn, we're going to have 20 population here, right? So 20 out of 19, we'd be above the pop cap. And then we would have built the granary, getting us an extra slot here. It would still say 5 of 6 here, and our food number would not be updated to show that it had the extra person in it. So sometimes you'll see that happen. All you need to do is, this is what I do anyway, to reset that. If you want to see what your actual numbers are on that turn, or what they will be at the end of the turn when everything gets fixed, you can just hit the reset button. So just go to city growth and then back to expert policy. It will rearrange everyone correctly, and then your numbers will actually be correct. Again, maybe you've never experienced that before, but I always get this little, it's like a visual cue that's off, where when you build that building, that turn, it doesn't, like if you're growing and getting an extra spot on the same turn, I think the computer fixes that at the end of the turn when it runs all of the gains and the yields for that turn. But it doesn't actually show you your correct number necessarily in the top. So that's just something to think about as you're looking at your policy. So if you run into that problem, that's just like, it's a visual thing that all gets corrected at the end. But if you're making decisions based off of your food and you're like, wow, why I'm on expert policy food priority, and why is this say 5 of 6? It's probably just that visual thing going on. So just switch to anything else and then back to your expert policy. It will fix that. Live, it will fix that like on screen, and then all of a sudden your number will correct itself up here if that's changed. So that's just something to be aware of with the specialists in Humankind as well. All right, so to review, I like expert policy, food, then industry, then science, then money. However, I do a little bit of maneuvering between food and industry at the beginning. That second population goes into industry. Then after that, I want it back into food. And then I'm going to prioritize getting food and industry all the way up before I start putting people into money and science. And then throughout the game, I may be moving that science and money back and forth based on what I need at the time. Thank you for tuning in to today's video. I hope that was helpful. Again, I'm really interested in other people's thoughts on this as well. So feel free to use that comment section down below to chat a little bit more about what your strategies are for specialist distribution in the game of Humankind. More Humankind content to come on this channel in the future. So if you liked what you saw, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can catch further videos. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week.